Do a mask. Do you want to test it? Hello?
You're sounding good.
How are you?
Fine. Yeah, I sound like I'm okay from what I can hear. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a little,
Go
you're
to,
taking yours off altogether?
are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Our guest today is Dorothy
Now, can you-
Jessup.
I can't hear you very well.
You don't hear me very
Very
well.
faint, yes.
Wow. Today, we are interviewing Dorothy Jessup, who is facilitating the current events interest group. And Dorothy has been at this for quite a while. I wanted to start off by asking her, can you tell us a little bit about your background that led you into this?
I will, but I can't hear you. Your voice is very faint.
Hmm.
Is the microphone turned on?
The microphone is on. I hear it
Yeah.
reverberating
Okay,
very
well, I
loudly.
got that you want me to talk a little bit about my background, not current events background.
Yeah, your background that led you to be interested
Okay.
in this.
Well, I'm Dorothy, but many of you know me. And I came to Woodland Pond even before it was built. But that's another story. I used to be a professor at SUNY, sociology. And I started that career pretty late in life. In my younger life, I was married to a man who was very interested in local politics in New York. And we got involved in the democratic reform movement because we lived in Brooklyn and the politicians in Brooklyn were corrupt. And we didn't succeed before we moved away, but eventually our group succeeded. But so I have always had an interest in politics. And we came to, well, do you want me to go on with how that's related to
No,
Woodland Pond?
yeah,
Okay.
continue on
So
how you
when
are.
we started here in Woodland Pond in 2009, the fall of 2009, just after it opened, there was a man here named, one of my aging weaknesses is remembering names, Max Feinstein, who was himself a leader in the local Democratic Party. And he was very anxious that we set up some way of getting people at Woodland Pond involved in local politics and informed, because we wanted the local politicians. We knew that our Woodland Pond success depended on our local politicians. So at that point, we started a group called Political Affairs, which was mainly focused on educating residents about local politics and bringing speakers and that kind of thing. And Max died about 2011, I think. And somehow the burden of political affairs fell on me. So I want to distinguish between political affairs and current events. Shall I start with the origins of current events?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so about sometime around 2015, 2016, a woman moved into Woodland Pond named Carol Neckdow. And Carol Neckdow had been living in a place in Highland that's a sort of, not a continuing care place, but sort of a senior sort of younger senior
Mhm.
place. And they had a group, a current events group, which she wanted to be the model for what we had here. And she was very interested in getting us take turns as presenters, researching topics. And that just didn't work. But that's a long story, which we'll
Mhm.
touch back on a little later.
Okay.
Carol was so adamant that we should do it that way, that she would spend most of a session telling us how we should be doing it.
Great.
But I just want to say one other thing before I move on. There was a man who moved in 2015. The first time I met him was at a current events meeting when we were discussing immigration. And I'll get back to that later.
Mhm.
But his name was Bill Sweetow. And Bill Sweetow, I think, was the backbone of current events, because we went through some really times that, that were very disorganized, and he just was steady and pragmatic, and he would come up with topics just on the safe side that we could talk about easily. So we'll get back to that later too.
Okay. Let's skip ahead for a moment and just talk a little bit about how current events works now. How does a typical session look nowadays?
Are you asking me how it sort of the stages it went through?
No, I'm talking about right now. Then we'll go back
wanna
and
talk
ask,
about it
how
now.
did we get
Okay.
there?
I have to say there's another person that made a big difference. And we went through several years of sort of trying this and that, and speakers that tried to give us a topic that didn't work out too well. And finally, in around 2016 or 17, a guy moved in named Shalom Schwartz.
2017, yeah.
And between his good nature and his sense of humor and his sort of tendency to be very broad-minded.
This isn't what I asked you
I'm
for.
not going to go on too much, but I mean, I do want to say that certain individuals did make a big difference in this group. So the way we work now, there's just one other thing I'd like to say about current events.
Sure.
We need to sort of come to terms with the population that we are. It's not an easy one for complex, steady, I'm an ex-college professor. You're a former university professor. We know how to do research on a topic and then give a presentation. I can't do what I could do back in my early 80s or late 70s, or certainly not what I could do when I was teaching. And many of our residents have one problem or another. Besides the fact that we're all aging, that's the one thing we have in common. We're different ages. Some people really have memory loss, and our friend Carol had that problem. And so then there are other people who seem to have personality changes and get very angry for unexpected things. So we need to be a kind of, we're a mixture of very good, intelligent participants, and some people who are alternately very intelligent and not so, maybe they're very intelligent, but not so patient as others. And
I
so
have
we
to
need, that's
interrupt.
our group, but I don't want to paint
Yeah.
yeah.
I have to interrupt for a moment. In the
But we've
time
come
I
to
have
the
been
ca-
here, I don't think I've seen more than once or twice, and certainly not recently, anybody really getting angry or upset. One of the things that I enjoy most about the group is
Yeah.
how
But,
we all are trying to
well,
support
that's
each
why I'm
other.
giving you credit, because since you've come, we've worked much more.
Can't
Yeah.
win.
You're not a trained social
Go
worker,
ahead,
but
go ahead,
anyway.
Dorothy,
um,
sure.
So the way we do it now, after years of struggling to find the right format, is that we pick a topic that we're a mixed group, but there are new people coming all the time. That's another thing. We lose people. And so we've lost some of our very, very good participants, but we've gained some new ones. And they are bringing life into our group. And what we do now, our format is pretty much, um, let's pick a topic for next week that we can all participate in so that nobody has to be the one responsible for giving the report. But we do need to have some things that we read. So we're not just kind of tossing out opinions and saying, well, this is what I think. Immigration is such a perfect example, because the very first meeting I went to was on immigration. The woman leading it stood up and said, my topic is immigration. I'd like to know what you all think. And immigration is an enormous, complex topic. So somebody got very angry and had to be let out of the room
Oh my
by his
God.
wife. And he said that anybody who wants to come to the United States should be allowed. And Bill Sweethouse, bless his heart, said, well, you know, you're going to have some limits here. And then somebody got angrier, and his wife took him by the arm and took him home. But immigration, again, about a couple of years ago, one of our residents volunteered to prepare for a topic on immigration, and she did not. Her first thing was, let's go around the room and see what you all think. So what we do now is let's look up material about the topic for next week, and make sure that you don't all have to read the same thing, but you all have to come prepared. And what happens, I think, is everybody does not necessarily come prepared, because some people can't read anymore because of their vision, but they listen and maybe ask a couple of questions or make one or two comments. And then 4 or 5 of us, or sometimes 6 or 7, will be very deeply engaged. And that we've had some very good, I think, discussions on that format.
At a typical meeting nowadays, we're on Zoom, so that has limited us. But starting next week, I think we will be meeting in the next week. We will be meeting in the
Oh, yes.
classroom again.
We will be, yes, this is a very good point, that we have been meeting on Zoom for about 2 months.
Oh, I think a lot longer. Yeah. For about
But now
eight
we're going
months or
to
so.
be resuming our meetings in the classroom. Will people have to wear a mask?
I do think so, but we will
Okay.
have microphones.
Okay. We'll be resuming our meetings in the classroom, probably with distance like we're sitting with right now. But that will be at 4 o'clock next Wednesday. So we're all invited to, anybody who is interested is inviting to attend, but I think we have a limit of 15.
The limit right now, I think, is 12.
12. We have a
But
limit of 12. So it's going to be, if you show up before the regulars, and the regulars will be left out, or vice versa.
Well, if we find that there are going to be more than 12, which is not at all unusual, we typically have somewhere between 12 and 15. And some have been coming on Zoom. In fact,
Yeah.
2 of our new participants aren't even living here yet,
Yeah.
but they participate on Zoom, and they will continue to participate on Zoom. And if there are others who would prefer to participate on Zoom, I think they
Yeah.
could, couldn't they?
Yeah.
Uh, okay. So you've given us a sense of how it runs. What are some of the topics that have come up
Well,
over the?
yes. Well, let's go back to, I think it was was it before the election or after the election that we did the electoral college?
After the election.
Okay, so starting this fall, I think I'm just going to back up a little bit. Over the last few years, the news has been so changing. There's always something in the news every week, and there were many times when we just said, the topic next week is whatever is the biggest in the news. So people would come with lots of emotion and lots of opinions, but not very, not very informative. And what we started to do now is that we have a topic that we share, as I mentioned before. And the first topic I think we did was we wanted to educate ourselves. So we thought, well, let's pick topics about things we don't know and we learn more. So the first one we did was the Electoral College. Let's look up, the details on the Electoral College. What does it actually say in the Constitution? What actually impact does it have to us? And I think we were all amazed at it has much more impact than we realized. And then after the Electoral College, we had.
Well, first with the Electoral College, what were some of the surprises? If you recall any of the surprises that we had, things we did not expect that we found with the Electoral College. For example, how and why it was originally formed and how the intentions of the Electoral College were different from what we have now.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you too well.
Okay, yeah. This is a typical problem that we all have.
Well, we learn a lot from these, yeah. And
so some of the other topics, Dorothy,
yeah.
yes.
So let's see, we did, well, this week, yesterday, we did immigration. And we had been, some of us had been reading. I don't think everybody reads, but they don't, they don't mess up the
No, that's fine.
conversation. They make a couple of short remarks.
Mhm.
And then those of us that do the reading, we may not all read the same things. We have an interesting discussion. And what we learned yesterday is exactly what we're told Biden is saying, is this is an enormously complex product and it's going to be very hard to unravel. And even in our discussion, there were just so many angles to come from that is an overwhelming topic. But what did we do last week?
Well, last week was the immigration. The one before that,
Remember?
My memory is not what it once was either. I can tell you what we're scheduled to do next week. I can think ahead. I don't think back too well. Next week, we're going to be talking about.
Next week, I'm going to talk about that. Right.
Why don't you go ahead?
All right. So I had planned to write down our former topics, and like many of you, my memory fails me right now on what our past topics were. But next week, our topic is the proposed legislation, the proposed federal legislation on voting. And this would be, what is the president and Congress proposing? We might read newspaper articles, especially the Times and Washington Post are very good sources. Sometimes you just look online and you find some good information. What are the hurdles? What's the background of that? Why is this happening now? So that will be our topic for next week. The what do we call it, Yaakov?
Pros and cons. the pros and cons of the proposed voting.
The proposed,
Federal
it's called
voting laws.
HR1 and
Mhm.
SR1 too, I
Right.
think. But it's proposed voting legislation. It's coming up in the House very soon.
Yeah, the articles that we read tend to be things that people locate and then send around the sites to find them, or even the whole articles
Yeah.
for those who want to read them. And some people read and some people don't. And that's not a sin if one
Okay.
comes without having read. There's lots to learn
Uh,
from talking with others. Dorothy, I'm sorry.
I can't
I'm
hear you
talking
again.
as
It's
loudly
amazing because
as
you
I
look like you
can.
have such a big microphone, but I think it's directed toward the audience. Let me say that if anyone is interested in coming to us next week or at any time, you can try us out, and you should contact, I will give Gretchen our phone numbers. You can ask her, and we'll put you on our list. And Yakov, who is one of our very engaged members, we're not members, we're participants. He will take your email address, or I could take it. I can give you, you can just go to the concierge, in fact, and ask them to connect you to Dorothy Jessup, and you can call me. They'll give you my phone number, and you can call me, and we can send you the information you need.
Tell me, Dorothy, are there any constraints, any limits or constraints on what can be discussed in
Yes, yes. Okay, well, there aren't limits really on what can be discussed, but there are limits because we're at Woodland Pond. And let me make this distinction clear. We can talk about anything we want, but we can't advocate in Woodland Pond property for any particular legislation or particular politicians. We can listen to them if we invite speakers from the outside who are partisan in any way. We have to be sure we invite the other side. So, for example, we did back in, it would have been 2018, when there was midterm elections for Congress. We thought, well, you know, our congressman is not all that interesting. Maybe we'd like to see who's up for Congress and invite the speakers here. And it turned out there was a primary for the Democratic Party. So there were 7 candidates, and we invited each of the 7 candidates to come and speak to us and ask them questions. But then if the Republicans had had a primary, we would have had to invite both of them. And then when we had one of the Democratic candidates came out ahead, so we had a forum with the Republicans, but before that we had to interview the Republican candidate. And that's a very complex thing to do. The reason for that is that Woodland Pond is the layman's term is we are a non-taxable community. And the law for people who are institutions that are non-taxable is that you cannot advocate politically for any one position or one side, other than, in our case, Woodland Pond. We can advocate for Woodland Pond.
But individuals
Yeah,
can
but
afterwards.
not for,
Yeah.
but we can, and what we do in this particular case, current events is not normally a participant in being active, we have discussions, but political affairs, we can bring speakers here. And we haven't, unfortunately, because of COVID, it hasn't been really, we could have had somebody come on a virtual visit, but politicians don't really want to come when there's not a crowd to speak to. So when we had some of those people in the past, we had big crowds.
Yeah, the politicians are very interested in
Yeah.
coming here because
Yeah.
we're a good voting bloc. We all go out and vote, or
So
very, very high
yeah. And
percent.
so political affairs, again, like current events, is educational. But if you're interested in being active, there you can as an individual, but you cannot do it using Then Pond's name or the community or even the room.
On what did some of the speakers that we've had in the past, what did they deal with? Do you remember anything about the topics that speakers we brought in
Were you talking
talked
about
about
speakers that we brought in besides those?
beside politicians?
Yes, we did over time have several speakers,
Mhm.
including very often one or another of our children, because
Yeah,
we have
that's true.
between us and among us, very interesting, somebody that had lived in Israel and talked about working in Israel, a young man, and I think he was a grandson. And then there was your son, who was a political science specialist in China, and he came to talk to us. And my son, who is a environmental specialist in Indonesia, and he came. And we had, in some cases, we had the speakers come to larger groups, and other times we had them right in the
Yeah. I think there was one, Marge Satter's
Marge
daughter
Satter's daughter, I think it
had
was.
been in Iran.
She'd been in Saudi Arabia.
Or is Saudi Arabia?
Is that right?
Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia.
Yeah,
Could
we
well
have
be.
lost a number of really wonderful people.
So if you have a son or
But-
daughter
Yeah,
or grandson or granddaughter who is a specialist in an area of
and there were others. I
current
can't
events,
remember all of
of
them.
relations to other countries, foreign relations, it would be a great idea. You don't even have to join the group. Just
Yeah.
suggest your son or daughter or grandson or daughter.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about, Dorothy? How often do we meet, Dorothy? We meet,
Well, we originally used to meet every 2 weeks, but now we're meeting every week. And
yeah,
those of us, you don't have to come to every meeting. You can come occasionally. But if you're very interested, you will find you don't want to miss anything.
and the sessions run until 5 formally, but I've noticed lately that we rarely finish at 5. Some people
Yeah,
have
right.
to leave, but
Yeah,
You get
right now,
interested.
our meeting is from 4 to 5, and you can leave at 5 if you want. And then usually if we're having an interesting conversation, we'll go over it, and we'll take a little time at the end of our meeting. We make a rule not to take too much time
Mhm.
to discuss what we're going to talk about the following week.
Right. When we were eating in the dining room, we wanted to make it for the 5:30 dinner. We haven't had that constraint
When we
lately.
get back to the point, yeah, there was a period before the COVID lockdown, where we were meeting from 4 to 5:30, and that was comfortable. And people who want to leave earlier can. It's better to come early and leave early than to come late, because you miss the beginning, you don't know what
Yeah,
other people
that
are
was
talking about.
directed at me. But, okay, Dorothy, I think our
It's half an hour.
time is up. So I
It's the
thank
time
you
to
very
wind up.
much. It's time to wind up. Did you have a closing message? Or are we done? Are we done?
Yeah,
Okay, folks, we're done.
yeah.
But we'd be happy to see as many of you as want to come
Yeah. So
to join us.
This is a very good example of the problem that we have as older people. My hearing is bad, and somehow the mic is not working in the
Here. Yeah,
pack, even though it's hopefully working where you can hear it.
okay.
Now, I wonder if I have to do this.